Now let's switch gears a little bit from SOAP and talk about introducing some RESTful web services. Again, REST is kind of like the second generation of web services. It's a bit more modern than SOAP. One of the great things about REST is it's simple and easy to use. It's not going to require the XML-based web service protocol, SOAP and WSDL, to support its interfaces. In fact, it uses a protocol that we're all very, very used to, HTTP. It's lightweight and doesn't require a lot of extra XML markup, and typically gives far more human-readable results, and its request bodies are often more readable using JSON or XML and not needing that whole envelope structure and metadata around each request and response. REST is also far easier to build in most cases and doesn't necessarily require a whole separate toolkit, or at least as heavy of a toolkit as most SOAP services would. Now, REST, again, stands for Representational State Transfer. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying that we're taking the architectural style where clients and servers exchange representations of resources, effectively using standard HTTP that we're used to using for lots of things, like accessing web pages. Other systems interact with web services through the HTTP protocol. The HTTP request method indicates what operation should be performed on the object identified by the URL. So we'll talk more about these methods like get, post, delete, put, and patch, and how these HTTP methods impact the meaning of your REST request. Now, some more on RESTful web service requests. In REST, there's this idea of data and resources, and these are represented using the URI. Resources are accessed or changed using a fixed set of operations, going back to those HTTP methods that are available. When you have a data and resource in the URI, let's say somewebsite.com/customers, then you could do a get operation, which would assume you want to retrieve the current state of that resource, for example, customers, in some representation, JSON or XML. If you wanted to post to the customer resource, it would create a new customer inside of that resource, customers. If you wanted to delete the customer's resource, it would assume you want to delete the entire thing you're identifying, so all the customers would be deleted. If you wanted to put to the customer's resource, that would imply you want to literally replace all of the customers with a new set of customers. Or if customers didn't already exist, but you're calling the customer's resource, it would effectively create that new customer's resource in the system. And then patch. So if you did a patch to a customer's resource, you could do partial updates to it rather than put, where you actually have to replace the entire thing. Some example web service calls might be to get a list of companies, to get a list of companies where the country equals France, to get the specific company ID 3 from the list of companies, to post to companies where you would want to add a company to the existing companies list, to delete the third company in the companies list, or possibly to put companies 3, which would, whatever company 3 is, it would replace that company with the information that you had put up to the companies 3 resource. So what would the response look like? Well, when you look at REST APIs, it's going to be most likely that you're going to see a JSON representation come back to your client. Now, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a lightweight data interchange format that's going to give you a human-readable syntax that you can very easily scan through. It also supports the primary constructs you need, which are collections and maps. Here in your screen, you can see a call, a GET request specifically, out to United Flights SFO. The JSON coming back indicates that there is a list of flights, and inside of that list of flights, there are various airlines, in this case all United, but various prices, departure dates, and so on in that list of flights. Very easy to read to the human eye. So now let's get into our first walkthrough around APIs and actually get some real examples. We're going to explore API directories and portals. We will browse the Programmable Web API directory. We'll explore the MuleSoft developer portal for popular APIs. We'll view an API definition file. explore the MuleSoft developer portal for Anypoint Platform. And we'll finally use the API console in an Anypoint Platform API portal to make some sample calls to an API. Let's get started. Let's start off by navigating to a popular website used for discovering and reading about APIs. We'll start off by opening up a web browser on our machine. And inside of this web browser, let's head to programmableweb.com. Once inside of Programmable Web, we can go inside and take a look at some of the different APIs in the API directory. If you click on the API directory at the top, there's an ability to browse throughout the API repository, and specifically some featured APIs at the top. Let's start off by checking out the Twitter API, as it would be pretty popular. Now we can see some details about the Twitter API, what it's used for, and some more information about the Twitter API as far as resources that we can get. Let's go ahead and head out to the API homepage. Once we've clicked on the API homepage, on the left, you're going to see many different API calls, similar to what we were looking at in the slides, that can be used to support calling out to Twitter. If we look at a specific call, maybe one that works with tweets in particular, we can see that you have the ability to make calls that would get you a specific retweet based on an ID. As you go through, you'll see there's not just GET requests, but also POST that would add to whatever the resource is in question. And obviously, it's very important to Twitter that it's documented cleanly. You can see when you click on one of these, it will tell you all about the resource itself, information about formats and parameters, along with some authentication information. Now let's take a look at a slightly different place. Let's look at some APIs that we have hosted in the Anypoint platform as examples. To get some of these links, it'll be helpful if you go to the snippets file in your student files. So I'm going to start off by launching that. Inside of the student files you downloaded for this course, you're going to find a snippets text file inside of it. Let's open that up. Inside of the snippets file, you're going to see a couple different links, one of which we've gone to. Let's go ahead and head to the MuleSoft developer portal for popular APIs. So we'll copy this link from the student files and head there inside of our web browser. Now this MuleSoft hosted developer portal has a bunch of example APIs inside of here that you can see that are built out. Inside of this list, let's go ahead and find the Google Calendar, and let's click on the V3 version of Google Calendar. Now, similar to the Twitter API, we want to make sure that this API is very cleanly laid out, easy to understand, and has all the documentation about the various calls you can make. So among some of the welcome information inside of here, let's click on the API reference on the left. Once the API reference loads, you're going to see this portal where you can go in and effectively see different calls and more information about the API itself. So let's say we want to get a call for calendars where we can specify a specific calendar and call a certain event. So inside of here, here's a calendars, calendar ID, events, event ID, all the different types of methods that can be applied to it. On our computer, let's click Get for more information. And now we can get some information about the specific call to the resource. We can see that this will return an event. We can see some information about the URI parameters, query parameters, very similar to how Twitter had their site laid out for information about APIs. Now, if we keep scrolling down inside of here, we've even got sample responses, so that if the developer is actually going in and reading about this API, they're not only going to know about the parameters that it expects and authentication, but also what the response body might look like that would come back to the developer. Now, if we scroll back up a bit, inside of the top of this GET request, we're going to see that there is a Try It button. Let's click Try It. This will provide us with a bunch of parameters based on what the RAML specification is that will allow us to go in and state what types of information we want to provide. So we could put in a client ID and a client secret and so on. In fact, if we were to go in and just go to the bottom of this and do a GET request using the GET button, you're going to see it will yell at us saying, hey, you need a client ID and you need a client secret to make this call. These are types of details that our APIs will take on very soon as well. For now, let's not worry about a client ID and client secret for Google Calendar. Let's just go ahead and click the Close button in the top right. Now let's check out the Delete tab for Calendars, Calendar ID, Events, Event ID. So we'll switch tabs to Delete. Similar call, but this time it's going to do a delete on that specific event. If we take a look inside of here and scroll down to the response on this delete call, you can see that if a delete is successful, it doesn't return anything in the response body. Instead, it just sends back a status 200 code, as we'll look closer at soon. Let's now take a look at the put request inside. Put is going to update an event, again, likely to take the body in which you put up onto this resource and replace the existing event ID with the new event that you're putting up. If we scroll down inside of here and go all the way down to responses, you can see that the response will be status 200 and then looks like some metadata around that particular event. Now let's scroll down to the bottom of the API reference page. At the very bottom, you're going to see a root YAML URL along with a URL to download the API definition as a zip file. Let's download our API definition as a zip file. Now let's take a look inside of that download. If we go into our downloads and extract the Google Calendar zip, we'll see that there's an API.raml file inside. We'll learn more about these YAML files soon, but let's go ahead and just open this up with a text editor for the moment. Inside of the text editor, we can see there's a lot of metadata about the API. It's called Google Calendar, it's version 3. In fact, as we scroll through, we can even see some of the similar resources and their methods as we saw inside of this API portal behind us. A lot more of this will come together soon as you see how this file drives and generates a lot of that documentation functionality that we've been looking at. But for now, after you've scanned through this file a bit, let's go ahead and close it out. Let's now take a closer look at the MuleSoft developer portal for the API platform. Once again, inside of your student files, head to your student snippets. In your student snippets, you're going to find a third link in the Module 1 section that is specifically for the API platform, Anypoint platform portals. We'll copy this link and we'll head there inside of our web browser. Now, inside of this specific item, let's go ahead and locate the API platform link. Now, this is MuleSoft's own API platform API. This is actually the place that I would go if I was working with a customer to get more information on our platform's API so that we could write different automated services. Now, on the left side of the navigation, I'll once again click the API reference item. And inside of API reference, we can see some of the different areas around the API. We have information about organizations, permissions, API portals, on and on. Again, things that we'll oftentimes use if we're writing certain automations and things like that inside of a customer's environment. For now, let's look at one of the public APIs so that we can call it ourselves. There's a public resource that has another resource in it called APIs. And this will search through the Anypoint platform, displaying a list of all of the public APIs that are seen inside of the API platform, like ones our customers might publish publicly. We'll go to Get inside of here. And once inside of Get, we'll check out some of the different things we can do. We can order for sorting, limit the number of elements on the response, skip over a number of elements, on and on. Let's try this out. So if we click the Try It button inside of here, we now can see a limit of query parameter limit, an offset, a query. Let's go ahead and send it in as is. And now this request will go outbound to our platform. We can scroll down inside of here, and inside we can actually see a bunch of APIs that are within our platform. So as we scroll through, if we find one, we can see an ID inside of here. We can see the name of that specific API, information about when it was created, and so on, details about the portal, description, on and on. So just like the APIs that we'll be developing, we even use these APIs in the API portal internally here at MuleSoft to build out and expose ways to call our own APIs so that you as MuleSoft users have the ability to go in and understand how you can tap into our own API set. So this has provided another example of how the API platform can be a great way for developers to understand how different APIs work. We're going to dive deeper in APIs in the next section.